Welcome back, or welcome to the Next Level podcast. I'm your host, John Harris. And as always, we're brought to you by Apex Performance, the only leadership and development training platform for security professionals by security professionals. I am super excited today to be joined by Jay Suggs. Shout out to Don Moran, who connected us. He said, John, you got to get this guy on your show. And yeah, I love what Don's doing. If you're interested in technology and AI space, I'll link to Don's podcast, and it's fantastic. He's a great guy. He's become a good friend, and I love what he's doing. But he connected me with you, and we hit it off right away, man. We had a conversation. I feel like we've known each other a lot longer than we've had, and I'm really excited to get your voice out to more people, to my audience, and for them to hear what you have to say. So Jay, welcome.
Thank you,
Appreciate it,
John.
man. It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be amongst like-minded individuals that love sales and leadership as much as we do. So I appreciate the opportunity, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right into it, man. Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got to where you are today. You're at a large corporate company right now, sales and
Right.
leadership, but it wasn't always that way. You've
No.
grown up through the industry, and so take us back and walk us through a little bit of your journey.
Well, John, to make a long story bearable, right? I am born and raised in the city of Newark. I will always represent that city because it molded and shaped me. I was raised by my grandmother, who instilled a lot of principles inside of me for my personal life as well as my business life. The organization I work for now is Johnson Controls. About 13, 14 years ago, I started as an individual contributor, just selling service agreements and going after new addresses and knocking on doors. And then in 2016, I embarked on my sales leadership career and never saw it in the picture, never saw it in the plan. But I like to say, you're not qualified for leadership, you're chosen, right? And I led various teams for service and install, and then something magical happened in 2020. I resigned from the organization, and I remember my general manager, Mike Ganella, shout out to Mike Ganella, saying, well, Jay, what are you doing? Give me 48 hours. I'm like, Mike, I gave you 2 weeks, right? 48 hours later, I was contacted by the leader of HR for our North America division, and they were talking to me about leading diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was just like, well, I'm not Barack. I'm just you know what I mean? I'm just a sales guy, right? But we started talking about, my approach to teams and sales. And, sales is an amazing thing because it doesn't matter your ethnicity, your gender, or what you identify as long as you produce, you matter, right? So I took that methodology and that approach and connected the two and led D&I for the organization for about 2 years. My first week was the tragic death of George Floyd. And I said to myself, okay, I'm not in sales anymore, right?
Right.
But I think we are all connected by 4 factors: environment, community, experiences, and struggle in every sense of the word. And if you think about sales, that's what it is, right? Sales is synonymous with life. You're going to have achievements in life. You're going to have achievements in sales. You're going to have setbacks in life. You're going to have setbacks in sales. You're going to defy the odds in your life. You're going to defy your odds and crush that quota in sales. It's all simultaneously. It all works together. So that was to make a long story bearable, John. And now I am the Senior Director of Business Development for the same organization. My job is to spearhead a team to get new logos and new addresses, which is always fun.
No, I love that. And I want to go back to something you said.
Yeah.
So you step in. I mean, so this what a whirlwind, right? So you decide, I want to go out and try something new. I'm putting in my notice. I'm going to go, do something different.
Right.
And the organization comes to you and says, no, 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 we not just do we want you to stay, but we want you to do
Right.
this whole new thing. And
Right.
then George Floyd happens,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so tell me about a little bit about that, about all of a sudden you're thrusted into a very, like, the voice of a topic that frankly is more controversial than it should be.
Right. Right.
But there's people who are on both sides of that of the discussion around DE&I. And then
Right.
we have an event that happens in our country which further, kind of catenizes that conversation. And
Full
now it's like,
visibility to everyone. Full
right.
visibility. Don't matter your W-2, your zip code, where you're from. It was for the world to see.
Yeah.
Uh, Here's the thing about leadership, and I'll tie that into diversity, equity, inclusion. Leadership is about finding individuals to rally behind a single idea to produce outcomes. So when you think about a tragedy that happened, let's go back 5 years ago. We never foresaw COVID happening, right? But one thing about COVID, no matter who you were, it impacted your life in so many ways. In fact, it was insidious of how it crept to the crevices of how we lived, right? Parents had to be quasi teachers, right? The things that were happening, racially charged issues, were seeping into employees, but they also had to show up for work. Think about it like this: all the things that happened outside of our work environment, we never had to really deal with the heaviness of it
Mm.
inside the work space because we're detached, right? We detached, we had duality. So when you think about when I took the role, I use my core leadership competencies. How do I create something larger than ourselves and have people believe in the benefit? If we work together, we can do a boundless of opportunities and make things happen. It's the same concept. When you have struggles and adversity, it's not really about you. It's about individuals that have a uniqueness that could come together, right? To really push through and thrive, to make things matter, to make things change, and also change the trajectory of where we're heading. So when that happened, I'm not going to lie, I was terrified. I was like,
Right.
okay, I know what this tragedy means to me as a man of color,
Mhm.
but I want to say, especially for the organization I work for, our CEO took a stance, right? Our CEO said our organization will not tolerate bigotry and racism. So when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion, it got to come from the top.
Right.
It has to come from the top. And then together we blended together to convey that unified messaging. It was a hard, challenging time, but I wouldn't change it for the world because I think it changed my perspective and lens on leadership.
No, absolutely. And I think, like, look, I live right outside of Minneapolis.
Right.
So, I experienced it to an extent. And I grew up in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
a fairly diverse area.
Very. Yep.
Move out to Minnesota, not as diverse.
Yeah.
uh,
I'll let you
uh,
say it, John. I'll let you say it. Right. Right.
and,
Right.
yeah, and so, you see, you kind of, interact with various cultures over your life, and you see this, and you just and you kind of watch it unfold. And again, it was like, I remember going in. I didn't work. I worked for a different company at the time,
Right.
and I will say they did a great job. It was Guidepost Solutions. They did a really good job, which I didn't expect. Do like managing that, and I didn't expect it because candidly, most of leadership looked like me.
Yep.
Most of leadership was former government agents, worked in the government for like I didn't think they, but we had a few folks that raised their hand and said we had like a an open call.
Yeah.
I was a remote employee here, and so we had kind of an open meeting of like, let's talk about it. And then we had a couple partners with the company who are African American who are like, hey, let's teach you guys about Black America. Let's have this conversation and let's talk
Right.
about things because you just might have never heard this before. So we talked about the Tulsa massacre, and we talked about some of these pieces of history
Right.
that it's easier to avoid if you look like me because it might not impact me, but it's more important to be a leader, to be uncomfortable so you can understand where, because you're going to lead people who don't look like you, and you're going to be
Right.
led by people who don't look like you. And so the
Right.
ability to embrace that, and frankly, like, finding, and I think our industry, you don't have to say this, I'll say it, I think our industry does a really shitty job with embracing DE and I as a concept of where you can get great people from. I think
No,
And
no,
so,
I'll make it as simple as this, and I'll preach this to the day I die. The more diverse your team is, the better chances have at hitting your targets.
mm,
Period. You no longer have a singular way to get there. You have a multitude, like we spoke before, of superpowers to get you there.
mhm,
One thing that I would say that came out of the tragedy and also COVID, the rise of an empathetic leader.
mm,
You cannot navigate and lead in this environment if you do not come from an empathetic perspective. Now, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. I'm not saying feeling sorry for people, but putting yourself in the shoes of the individuals that are going through things and ask yourself inwardly, how would I feel?
mm.
What would I do in that scenario? Would I even be able to function? You have to be an empathetic leader in order to push through this current climate. Everything has full visibility now. The day of the leader just being in the corner office, closing the door and pushing through metrics is over. You need to ask people, how are you? How are you doing? Now, what I will say in leading diversity and equity inclusion, it also did something for me that I did not practice most of my career. I constantly look inward,
Mm.
constantly, because you're right. Not everyone on your team is going to look the same, right? Not everyone is from the same zip code. Not everyone has the same upbringing. In fact, not everyone has the same W-2. You got to meet people where they're at in order to bring the team together. I don't really like the word team more than I love the word community, because
Mm.
that's what you're building. You're building a community, because even if people leave the community still goes on. You ever notice when leaders, their teams are, let's just say there's high attrition in the league, and they're, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, if you build a community, you laid out a roadmap so you could find other like-minded individuals to be a part of your community and what that mission and vision is.
Yeah, I love that. I always thought, when I was a leader, and kind of where the switch flipped for me, I started leading with love.
I love
And
that.
when I started
Love that.
talking about that and saying, and I learned it, there's an author, John Gordon. He writes about, leading with positivity and love, and he makes a distinction of, like, this isn't Pollyanna positivity, like
Right.
it's empathy versus sympathy.
Right.
But it's that I want the best for you, and I lead from my heart with love, and that includes, if the best for you isn't on my team, and I love the way you put it, community, then I want to support whatever your goals and missions are, because
Absolutely. Absolutely.
building a community where literally all I care about is you getting the best for you. I'm going to naturally, I always called it, I'm going to graduate people off my team,
Right.
because I
I,
want them to go do what they want to do, and then I'll continue to add more people to the community.
I call it, listen, right now I'm dealing with some attrition, and I consider it a life decision. If you decide to move on away from this team or from the organization, I wish you all the best. Because who are we to challenge if people want to grow or if
Mm.
they want more for themselves? Who are we to challenge that, right? Even us as leaders have to ask those same questions. Is it time to move on? Is it time to do something a little more challenging? Is it time to challenge myself, right? So when individuals come to me and they say, Jay, I'm moving on, you want everybody to stay, right? Because you invest this time into people and you build this community, but at the same time I want everyone to thrive. So I get it. Now, I may not agree of the reasoning of why they're leaving. I may not agree if this is the right time to leave, but guess what? That's their journey, right? That's their path. They got to figure that out for themselves, right? And if I did my job right as a leader, I'm empowering them. So they're making decisions that are best for them. I don't lead to tell people what to do. I lead to help people to feel empowered so they can make the best decisions for themselves. And if that's moving on, I support it.
And I think that, you know, I talk to a lot of people, and some folks say something like that, and you're like, that's just words.
Right.
How do I know that it's not just words when you say that? Because just today I saw somebody comment on your LinkedIn post, who, by
Oh,
looking at
really?
looking at their work history, was a former employee, like former team member, and saying, that's why you're one of my top 3 leaders I ever worked for.
Oh, wow. I got to catch that one. I didn't
Yeah.
even catch
So
that.
what is that? It was a post about your grandmother loving Kenny Rogers. That's
Yeah,
all.
the gambler, man. I was thinking
Yeah.
about it this morning, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do I, and that's where, why this is leaders, lean in and listen up. If you focus on what's best for your team, and then when they make the life decisions, when they move on, they now become brand ambassadors for your leadership going forward.
You know
They
what,
are going to
John? They become a
amplify you.
part of your journey.
100%.
They become a part of your journey. And, also leading diversity, inclusion, equity, and inclusion taught me something very, very valuable. You don't want everybody on your team to be just like you. You want extroverts, you want introverts, you want, you know, analysts, right? Type of business acumen. You want individuals that that has that infectious personality, right? You want these different personalities and profiles and experience on your team, because what it does is unify the messaging of what's important for that team, right? Um, Listen, when you work in a corporate environment, the corporation has their vision and mission, right? I like to think of that as the umbrella of it all, right? But under that umbrella, if you don't have a mantra and vision for your team, you're not connected to that broader vision and mission. There's no alignment, because you don't look and see what is important that you want your team to achieve. I always find it interesting when sales leaders really think it's about the money. When they think it's about the money, why someone stays or why someone goes. Money is a factor. However, I think who they work for is a factor. I think the culture is a factor. I think trust is a factor, right? Whenever I lose a person in regards to resignations, I always look inward. What could have I done better? And listen, if I know that I exhausted all possibilities, then I can sleep at night, right? I know
Yeah.
that I advocated on behalf of these individuals, and I just want the best for them. And this is a small world, because we call it boomerang. You never know. They'll be
Yeah.
back in it. They may be back in 18 months, right? So that's why I always tell people, the way you exit may be the way you re-enter again.
100%. I know I worked for a company, one of the larger technology companies in the space,
Yeah.
and was impacted by a layoff.
Right.
And I made sure the way I handled that layoff was, because you never know.
You just never
And
know.
you
Right.
never know. And so, and I saw the president of the company at a trade show 2 months later, shook his hand, said, great to see you. They would go on to, I'd work with them in other different capacities
Oh, wow.
in every job I've ever had,
Wow.
because because I didn't take it personally,
Right.
right? I had been on the other side of something like 11 reductions in force, where I was giving that bad news to other people. And again, because I did it with empathy, I did it with understanding. And then when it was done to me, this was my response. And I don't say this to impress people. I say it to press upon the point that you have control over your reaction to things, even if you don't have a control over what
All
is
day.
happening to you.
All day.
They were comforting me and talking to me. I'm at home. I got 4 kids. My wife
Right.
didn't work at the time, and I go, you know what? Go call the people who can't handle it. They need you more right now. I'm good. I'll
Right.
find a way. Right. And so, because I
Yeah.
knew there were other people getting that phone call that day that were not going to be able to handle it. So I said,
Right.
you go deal with them. I'm fine. I'm good. You guys, thank you for everything. Appreciate you. Right. So, those are, because again, our industry is small enough that, like, you're either going to be known as someone that people don't want to work with,
Right. Right.
someone that people want to work with, right?
No, I
So,
agree.
you have that opportunity in those unique moments on how you leave. I think it's a great way. How you leave will unequivocally either provide the opportunity to return or other opportunities in the future.
I just want to touch upon something you
Yeah.
said, because I want the audience to understand this. There's going to come a time when there's reduction in force, and you may be a part of that. You are not defined
Mm.
whatsoever if a business decision is made that you have to part ways with an organization. Do not internalize it. Look at it this way. It is creating space and opportunity for you to shift and focus on either your passion, your purpose, or a different industry, or to retool how you approach the business in its entirety. It's never a loss. Now, I know some of the audience is like, well, I'm out of a job, I'm collecting unemployment. Just like you said, though, John, if your brand is out there, right, and it's because skills are transferable,
Mm,
you will land on your feet,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
But it's
mean,
how you internalize that news that will determine how fast you'll land on your feet.
yeah. I mean, the framework that I try to use the most of my ability is E plus R equals O. Yeah, it's the event plus the response equals the outcome. The
Okay.
event, non-controllable. The
Yep.
outcome, some influence. The
Yep.
response is the only thing you can control. So understanding how to put distance between the event and the response and not internalizing it. Again, like my work product that I put out at work does not define me as a human being.
Right.
What defines me as a human being is that I expect excellence out of myself in whatever
Right.
forms that I do it in as a
What is
parent.
your bar?
Exactly.
Right. What
So
is
so
your
if
bar?
I put something out and I know I did my best and someone comes back and said this isn't good enough, then all right, then I'm going to do more, right? Or if I get laid off tomorrow, then I know it's not based on my performance, it's based on other factors or an expectation, whatever it is, I'm still going to move
There's
forward.
no accidents in life, John.
Yeah,
Think about it.
100%. Yeah.
There's no behind every title and responsibility, there lies the person.
Hmm.
And what are your core values? What are your competencies, right? What matters to you the most? I think right now leaders are being challenged between directives and direction, right? Because they get blurred. I look at directives as tasks, a multitude of tasks. I look at direction as the vision. I could feel it. I could see it. It has an energetic tone to it, right? And I think as leaders, it is our job to be facilitators. I like to say the brokers of hope,
Hmm.
right? To navigate that for our teams. Because sometimes the things around your team are chaotic. It's out of control. Variables that you have no control over. But at the same time, they need to understand what the energy behind what the mission is, right? I tell my team all the time, handle what's in front of you, block out the noise.
Yeah.
Handle what's in front of you. Focus on the customer. Focus on the customer. That body of work is sustainable. But if you worry about all these external factors, and I know with some sellers may say, well, these external factors prevent me from doing my job. Well, no, they're annoying. They're annoying. I'll say that. They're frustrating, but you know what the assignment is. Each and every day you wake up, you know the assignment is either to generate new business or to manage the business that you have and create a line of communication with your customer. You know that day in and day out. You know, every time I have a client meeting, you know what I say, even if I'm neutralizing an issue? I said, I don't know if anyone told you this, but I appreciate your business. I know right now in this current state, you may not feel the love, but I'm committed to make sure that you see what great looks like when we put our minds together, when we get it right, when we get back on track. That's another thing in business right now that is not happening. We become so reactionary, we just jump onto a problem, but we're not apologizing. No one's apologizing. No one's saying sorry for an inconvenience that your customer is dealing with. We go right into, well, I did this and I did that and I emailed you and this is why this happened. Nobody cares about the background noise. You need to be able to show up in front of your customer and say, listen, we're solutioning this. Here are the steps of how we're going to get there. And oh, by the way, it's unacceptable what you've received thus far, and I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah. I
in
mean, that,
meetings sometimes, John, and I'm like, okay, no one's going to apologize. No one's going to say sorry to the customer.
well,
Think
that
about
gets back to the empathy part of, right,
it. Right,
like again, terms that are thrown around like customer centric,
right,
but really what that means is like how do you want to be treated as a customer? I'll give you a great example. My wife, we just changed insurance from my coverage to my wife's.
right.
So, um things like that happen. They're always stressful as the coverage there. My
Right.
son has some medication. She goes to pick it up. Usually costs us $20. They're like $800. She's
Whoa.
like, whoa, this ain't right. They're like, he's not on your coverage yet. So she's got making these phones. So she calls back. She can't get through to the pharmacy.
Right.
Keeps going to a voicemail. But I go, just keep hammering zero until you
Right.
get through.
Right.
Finally, she gets a human on it. She's like, explains the situation to her. She's stressed out. She's in tears. Like she doesn't like ordering pizza, Jay, let alone
Right.
talking to this.
Right.
This woman apologized and said, I'm so sorry you have to deal with this today. Let me figure out, put you on hold real quick. Let me figure out what I can do. She goes on. She goes, I found a coupon that we can give you 30 days for $25.
Wow.
Okay. 90 days was 800, 30 days for $25. We know that as soon as her stuff goes through, it's going to be fine and taken care of. But
It'll
like,
rectify some. Right.
we will never use a different farm. I will never go to a different pharmacy ever in my life because this one person took five, instead of being like, sorry, ma'am, I don't know what you want me to do about it. She
Right.
took 5 minutes to one, she apologized. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. Two, she found a solution that allowed us to move forward in a way. And I will never use anybody else in my life because I mean, they could fuck this up. They got like 10, 20, like they've created so much rope with
Right.
me
Right.
because of one, just that one moment. So you think about when you approach customer service as true, serving your customer,
Yeah.
what that can do and the relationship that can create and the goodwill, because you're not going to be perfect, the
Never.
goodwill you can create in the future because of those unintentional points of positive contact that you can make just by what interactions you're having with your customer.
Here's the beautiful thing, though. Ownership solidifies
Mm.
the relationship. And what I mean by that is there are days I'm an ops leader, there are days I'm a service leader, and then there are days I'm a business development leader, right? I morph into whatever is the need at that time. I instill that in my team. It's not easy to digest, especially to a mindset of a seller. I get paid to sell. You do. However, you also get paid to ensure and protect the interests of what you sold and the experience of what the customer is going through. When I'm looking for to mentor leaders, you know what I look for?
Mm.
Selflessness. The individual that doesn't matter what their titles say on their email signature. They just take the bull by the horn and try to figure it out. They don't need overhead to lead. They just jump right in. And I think right now in this current business climate, we need more leaders as opposed to just performers. Think about it. I could tell you throughout my whole sales leadership career, there's a lot of top performers that I did not find to be nice people.
Mm.
They weren't empathetic. They weren't selfless, right? And we rewarded that because they hit their numbers. But what I'm looking for in individuals to be a part of my community is the ones who take ownership in things that are not part of their job description. And I know that sounds crazy, but what I'm saying is I am looking for individuals who want to impact change. And they'll do it by whatever the needs of that customer is. I like to think of it as you bring everybody to the party, right? When I was a sales rep, it was about me bringing everybody to the party. Bring all my smart people to the table, bring all my engineers to the table, all for the betterment for that customer. We need more of that in this current business climate. Enough of the silos. You got to do a little bit of everything, unfortunately. But in
Yeah.
the long run, a couple of things will happen. You're the hero to the customer. New opportunities come up. Who are they calling? Not the person that sold them something and disappeared for 6 months. The individual that's been there through their journey and through their experience. Hey, we got a new location. Want to talk to you about it. You know why they're going to you? Number one, they trust you. And number two, you overextended yourself for the betterment of their account.
Mm.
Just a thought.
And so to maybe double tap on that a bit, how do you feel that skill set enables someone to be a better leader. So as an individual contributor, they show those kind of things. How does
Yeah.
that translate into leadership and going on to either lead, different functions, lead more
Yep.
people? It feels like there's a direct translation
Oh,
and correlation to that.
it's one word, serve.
Yeah.
If you serve as an individual contributor and you serve as a leader, that's the tie-in. That's how I became a leader in sales. I wasn't looking to be a sales manager when I first started.
Mhm.
They asked around, who's the rep that does onboarding and reps shadow? My name came up. Funny did I know, I didn't think that was part of leadership. I just did it because I just wanted to help. But if you think about it, even when I talk to individuals who want to embark on leadership, when they say to me, when the first thing they say to me, John, is I just want to make more money, you're not built for this. You're not ready for this.
Mm.
Right? Because what I want to hear is what do you want to do to help? What do you want to do to help the individuals? What do you want to do to help the customer? What do you want to do to help the organization? Because it's a selfless position. You have to serve. I'm always looking for individuals that want to go into leadership. I always pay close attention to their serving capacity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, to your point, you talked about this earlier, that some of your best performers, by the metrics, if you just look at financials and
Oh, they're
outputs,
crushing it. They're crushing it. Yeah,
are
yeah.
your worst people, which means you would be worst served to put them in charge of other people because they're just going to say, just do what I do, right? It's why Michael Jordan doesn't make a good coach. He's a killer on the court.
Right.
He was not a good leader in a coaching capacity because
Right.
he's just like, hey, watch me do me, right? Like I can't understand why you can't do what I'm doing and just do it. Now
The
there's
most
other
dangerous thing we do is assume a top performer is ready for leadership. That's the most dangerous. The thing, and then when we approach the performer, they're not even inquiring about the job,
Yeah.
right? But we go to them because they were such a great performer. There's a difference. There's a skill set to be a top performer. There's a skill set to be a leader.
Yeah.
Every now and then you get lucky, right? Every now
Both.
and then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do both. I will tell you this, I am a better leader than I was an individual contributor. I was selfish. I was your standard sales rep who was all about me. And I didn't care as long as I closed the deal. And the shift happened for me when I realized that it's not them, it's me,
Hmm.
right? I tell people all the time, if you don't change your bad habits and your approach, even if you leave the company you with, the only thing that changes is the name outside of the building.
Hmm.
You got to do that inside work. As a leader, you have to do that inside work, right? Constantly. It's not like a one-day thing. It's not a retreat. It's not a workshop. You got to do that inside work daily.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Consistency of activity day over day,
All day.
and like you said, changing those habits. When you look at, like, you can't get, like, if I eat really poorly and I work out daily, unless I take away the negative habit, the positive habit isn't going to get
Exactly.
the desired result. So if you're still doing bad things and have bad habits and you move and you change your environment, I work at JCI, I'm gonna go work for a company XYZ, but you don't change you're gonna get the same results you got, and then you're just gonna be pointing finger. I like, you see it all the time, like, especially in our industry in sales. You see the sales nomads that just go and they do enough, they do all right, and they have a book of business and they get by, but it's like you're if you're moving every 2 years, it's probably because there's something you're doing that you refuse to change. And if you just did, would unlock a whole new level of opportunity and success for you.
When top performers leave an organization, it's rarely about money. It's about culture. It's about what they feel they're not receiving. At the end of the day, employees want to be seen and they want to be heard. That's it. Seen and heard. And as leaders, we have to have more courageous
Mm.
conversations with our community, with our team. You know, there are days where I don't know the answer, and I have to express that. There are days I don't agree with the business decisions that are made, and I say that. You you got to be a human manager, not a micromanager.
Mm.
Got to be a human manager.
Well, let's tie back to something you touched on before, but I want to dive into it a little bit
Yeah,
deeper.
sure.
We talked about in today's environment,
Yeah.
right? Politically, financially, economic,
Yep.
like there's a lot of upheaval
Right.
globally, wherever you're at, and that generates fear. And you talked a little bit about where we have leaders that are leading from fear, and so discuss a little bit about kind of what happens when you lead that way, and what's a different way that leaders can lead when those external factors are the way they are today.
First and foremost, let me be clear. We all lead from fear at one point or another, right? Fear of crushing a number, fear of expectation. Imposter syndrome is real. I don't care what nobody says. You got to be honest with yourself. It's real. Fear of insecurity and fear if you can measure up. The best thing you can do is be authentically vulnerable in regards to what makes you uneasy, right? Um, it's okay to know, it's okay to know that you don't know how you're going to hit your number. What's not okay is that you know you don't know how you're going to hit your number and you pretend you're going to hit your number, right? Because you're causing all this anxiety on top of how in the world are you going to hit your number. What we don't do well enough as leaders is that we do not find like-minded advocates. Like, it's interesting. I always talk about how people are always looking for mentors, but I never hear leaders talking about looking for mentors. What is this notion is as soon as you become a leader, you don't need a mentor? You need a mentor more now than ever if you're a leader. And I don't even like the word mentor because it just sounds like an event. You just need, what do they call it? You need a board of directors,
Right.
right? You need a board of directors for everything, adversity, financial, strategical thinking, situational awareness and scenarios, individuals that you can learn from and talk to and create some insightful ways of how to approach it. The best way that I try not to lead from fear is what I say to myself.
Mm.
We believe the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So you know what I say every day when I wake up? I am an executive. I am committed to helping my people get to the goal that they're trying to achieve, and I am here to serve. That's what I tell myself. And at the end of the day, which is most days, sometimes I feel like I don't measure up to it. But guess what? The next day I go back at it the same way. I never lose the enthusiasm. Now, there's some days I want to pull my hair out, even though I'm bald headed, right? If I had hair, I would definitely pull it out. But the idea is each day you got to keep showing up with the same enthusiasm, the same focus. When you serving others trumps fear. So I always tell people too, when you're suffering and you're going through something, why don't you try to go helping somebody? I had a friend who landed on hard times and he was sleeping in hotels and he was really complaining about falling from grace. And I felt for him. I really did. But I said, why don't you go to a shelter and go volunteer? You won't even be thinking about the fact that you're staying at a Hilton Garden Inn. Trust me. And he did that. And I remember him texting me, he was like, dude, I'm here helping people who live on the street. And I do have the means to stay at the Hilton Garden Inn. I'm just in transition right now, trying to land on my feet. I was like, yeah, gratitude is the anchor of perspective. Whenever I have a bad day, I ask myself, what am I grateful for?
Mm.
All leaders need to do that. We are in position to facilitate and be the brokers of hope, right? It's our job to inspire change. It is a duty. It is a privilege to be a leader. It's not a headache. If it's a headache, maybe it's not for you.
Right.
You know, if it feels too much like work, maybe it's not for you. But it is a privilege to be a leader, to be chosen, to be in charge of people, and to guide them, right? And to help them thrive and persevere through challenges, and at the same time, make money to take care of the people that rely on them. It's a beautiful thing. If you really think about it. I said to a buddy the other day who's a leader, I said, you remember when you first became a leader and how excited you was? Go back to that memory. I remember when I was first, 2016, they asked me to lead. Man, I thought I hit the lottery. And not because they were going to pay me money, pay me a whole lot of money, But I was like, wow, I have the opportunity to help people. I have the opportunity to advocate for people like people advocated for me. That's a privilege, John. It's really a privilege.
Well said. Well said. There's a couple of things you said that I want to tease out there. One is, faith and fear cannot coexist,
No,
and gratitude, can push out that state of fear. And the mind is a crazy strong thing when
plays
we
tricks on you. Plays
and
tricks on you.
but you can also play tricks back. So like what you do in the morning, you're implanting a thought in your head. The mind, you have 90% of the thoughts you have on a day-to-day basis are repetitive.
Right.
Think
I
about the
agree.
same things over and over
Same
again.
thing over and over again. Yep.
60% of those, 70% of those are negative by default. So 90% over and over again, 60 to 70 of that negative. You got to control your self-talk. So by you implanting a thought in your head every morning and saying, I use these things called I am statements, right? So like, I am a great father and husband. I'm
Love it.
financially free. I am in physically elite shape. I am this, I am that. Now, all those things aren't true yet,
Right.
but I implant that in my head so that my self-talk gets this foundation of positive affirmations to say, this is what I am. And I start to
Right.
self-identify. Then expectancy theory, what you expect, you attract. So if you're out there and and you talked about it before, kind of the corporate umbrella, right? And sometimes that corporate umbrella, it doesn't jive with with the community you're trying to
It,
create.
it, it doesn't it doesn't align in your day to day. I
Yeah.
look at the corporate vision and mission as the broader awareness of what the organization wants to
Mhm.
do. Now, how do you help an organization get to that broader messaging? You got to get down to the day to day.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Yeah. But I also would say I don't want to I just because I guess I'd like your feedback on this, because this I've always thought about this, an excuse that leaders will use to not apply some of the concepts that you and I are talking about. That won't work here, is what I hear. That won't work
Oh
here.
yeah, I know that
Right.
all too well. Yep.
And
That will
so
work here.
I always say, hey, man, you can create whatever culture you want in the community or team you have. It does not have to be a replication of whatever is above you. You have full autonomy to say, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to
Right.
lead and serve. I'm going to do that. Just because my leaders don't do that doesn't mean I'm not going to do that. And I have a validation point of this. When I was a director of security for a large aerospace defense company, this is when I started applying this. When I was in my first big leadership role.
Right.
And I said, and I started rolling out these changes that I wanted, these cultural changes of things we're talking about today. And my lead, I led leaders, and I said, this is what a leader on our team is going to look like. And they're like, well, our company's not going to buy in this. I said, I don't care. I'm not asking permission. We get
Right.
to create a spark and a community of what we want to do. And people are going to come ask us. And this is a
Right.
compliance organization
Right.
that usually it used to be miserable to work for. And my mission was to change that. I said, we're going to have people say, why are they having so much fun over there? And it
Right.
happened. The cultural survey that went out on every member on my team, hundreds of people took a survey. We had
Right.
the highest scores in the entire company.
Wow.
And
But
so,
isn't that amazing how you rally behind that one idea to produce the outcomes?
exactly.
Think about it, right? I always tell people when they take a position, I always say redefine the role.
Hmm.
Your job description is just a baseline.
Yeah.
In fact, it puts you in a box. So, how do you envision the role? And how do you see yourself infused into the role? And how do you think the role can be better? Do it. So, a leader could say to you, wow, you know what? I never thought of it that way. Right. I think
Hmm.
people, when they accept positions, it's always funny to me. Somebody asked me the other day, like, how do you know someone's going to be okay in the company when you just hire them? I said, honestly, it's the ones that are enlightening me about some of the processes that I'm not even aware of, because they're not chasing, they're attracting, and they're trying to figure it out. See, us as leaders are conflict resolution specialists. Our job is to troubleshoot. So whenever I see a new employee and they're sending me all these emails for certain approvals, I'm like, wow, this person's figuring it out. Now, the employee that I see that struggles is the one sitting at the desk, just redoing their modules and just waiting.
Mm.
That's how I could tell if an employee is going to be okay, right? Because in our fast-paced environment and organization I work for, it's always ever changing.
Mm,
We don't have time to just sit there and do modules. You got to figure it out.
right.
Right. And so I always appreciate that about a new employee that's just, want to absorb and learn the industry, but at the same time, they're creating their own sphere of community. They're trying to find out who the stakeholders are, right? Who's the decision makers. I always love when I see a new sales rep say, "Hey Jay, I'm gonna do a ride along with service." I smile inside, right? Because you're trying to understand what it is that you're trying to sell, and you need to connect the dots. You'd be surprised how many individual contributors don't really know what the service and ops team do to execute their work. How could you not know how things are brought to life based on the things that you present and pitch to customers? I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
You gotta know, right? So when your customer's having pain, you understand the pain because you know how it works, right? I'm not really big into just because you can, another thing, John, is funny. I know you know this. Oh, he could talk or she can talk. They're good talkers. Since when does that constitute a good seller? Since when? That runs out real quick. What constitutes a good seller to me is perseverance and the eagerness to learn and always keep learning. That's it. And serve.
I love it. That's, and maybe we can wrap up on this concept on because I was an end user for half my career, and I've
Right,
been in sales and development and consulting for the other half. And I
right,
and so it's kind of this unique perspective on being sold to and then selling to others,
right.
where you can see, I always remember the idea of like, um I never had this like adverse thought around sales. Like my grandparents, my both grandfathers were entrepreneurs, sort of their own business. One did
Oh, that's
insurance
awesome.
sales
Yeah,
and one did marketing sales. He went door to door selling pencils with your company's name on it. Both of them created huge businesses, did very well for themselves. Started out, just the same, just bootstrap. So I saw them sell,
right,
and my dad was an entrepreneur, and so he had to go sell. And so I always saw it as like, this isn't a bad thing. This is how business is made. But I
nothing
really,
happens without a sell.
nothing happens until sales happen. But
Yeah,
but I think, and that's why I wanted to go into sales. I remember,
right,
getting to like at early 30s, getting to the executive position and being like, is this all? Am I going to do this for the next 30 years? And I
right.
go, you know what I'm going to do? I want to do something that scares the shit out of me. I'm going to go into sales. And so, but I think, and there's a lot of folks who I know, a lot of young people that I mentor, they come into sales right away because they were just like, I figure I can make a lot of money, or they were hiring anybody, right? So,
Right.
but you talked a little bit about it. So in closing here, what in your experience of doing this for as long as you had and working with a bunch of salespeople and leading and developing them, what three things make someone great at sales?
So it's interesting you say that. Um, I don't really look at resumes that much. I read the resume. I don't really look at the whole chronological thing. I know there's certain standards when you're looking at the resume, how long person been in a company and all those things. But in every interview I have, I put the resume to the side and I always ask them, tell me something that I can't find out on this resume. Tell me something that you've been through
Mm,
that while you were immense in it, you didn't know how you was going to make it to the other side, but you did. And all of a sudden, you start hearing these fascinating stories of individuals defying the odds and persevering, whether it be a death in the family or divorce or, you know, being homeless. You just hear all these amazing stories. Because to me, one of the core competencies of being a great seller, number one, is perseverance,
mm,
right? Number two, they lead from within. In other words, they don't need overhead or a title to lead. They lead by their efforts and their actions, right? And number three, I would say humility, right? Know when to regulate yourself and say, you know what? I dropped the ball on this. Or you know what? I need help. I need to ask. You know what? I got a fourth one for you because it's helped me throughout my career. Diplomacy,
mm.
right? How can I convince others to help me in this journey to close these deals?
Mm.
I always used to say to my team when I led construction and install, I used to say, you don't come into the office and do your rounds with the ops leader. You're sending these quotes and proposals for approval through an email. When was the last time you walked in and asked that gentleman how he's doing? This gentleman team brings your deals to life.
Mm.
How dare you not come visit them and just have some alone time with them? Because there is a stigma about salespeople, right? They blow you off. They don't care. No, diplomacy. You'll get more with diplomacy than anything. You know, I always find it funny when I used to see sales sellers, and they'll send an email and it's like they're drawing a line like, yeah, I'm on the customer side. No, you're on the side of what's right. And what's right is you need to represent the organization and the customer and find that happy place
Mm.
where everybody can live in it. There is no line. Don't draw the line, because you need ops and service just as much as they need you. And you got to create that harmonious synergy. So perseverance, diplomacy, humility, and what was, I would say, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I think that was the word I was looking for when I first said it. Yeah, emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, this is a masterclass for anybody. I mean, we covered a lot of ground here.
I know, man.
And
We talked about a lot of stuff, John. I don't know. We might lose some people. We went.
no, I mean, anybody, in my opinion, so I'm biased, but anybody who is any sort of professional in the security industry, if you're a leader in the security industry or any industry, sales leader or salesperson, listen to this, listen to it all the way through. There's so much value in here. Any closing thoughts, Jay? Anything you want the listeners to know, or things you want to add in we haven't covered yet?
You can always DM me in LinkedIn. I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. I would also say that it is important that you take care of yourself as a leader. As much as we give and as much as we serve, we have to be selfish sometimes so we can do the jobs that we're chosen to do. So self-care, mental health, that's important. You just can't go, because eventually you'll run out of gas and you'll hit a wall. So whatever those pockets of joys are, right? If it's watching sports, if it's fishing, spending time with family, smoking a cigar, drinking a glass of bourbon, whatever those pockets of joys are, you make sure you put those things on your calendar just like you do your responsibilities. Because if you're not full inside, you can't show up to help others.
So true. So true. Jay, I appreciate you, man. Thank you
Appreciate
so
you,
much for
John.
your
It's been
time.
great, brother.
Let's go do great things.
All day.